Hello students, today in the lecture we learned about line types, and in the lecture we discussed about three types of lines based on their weight or thickness. We learned about three types. We called those lines as thick lines, medium lines, and thin lines. And we discussed that these three are relative terms. Like if I have to draw these lines, we have to choose one thickness for thin lines first. Suppose I have drawn one line and I have taken the thickness of that line as, let us say, 0.5 millimeters, and I'm calling that line as a thin line. So we learned in the lecture that if we have to draw medium line, then I have to increase the thickness of thin line by 1.5 times. So that will become the thickness of medium line. Then we learned that if we have to draw thick lines, then we will increase the thickness of thin line by 3 times, then that will become the thickness of thick lines. This we have learned in the lecture. And we discussed that if we have to draw lines, we can use three grades of pencil like H grade, 2H grade, or HB grade pencils. But in the lecture, I said that we will use only one grade to draw the drawings, that is HB grade. And in the lecture, I said that we will use clutch pencil of 0.7 mm. We call this as lead pen also. So the grade which we will use for the leads will be HB grade. So now we will see how to draw these three types of lines with one grade only, and the thickness of this lead which we are using is 0.7 mm. So let us see how to draw these three types of lines. So now listen carefully. Now suppose I want to draw thick line. So what I will do, we will put more pressure on the nib of the pencil and we will draw a thick line by giving more pressure on the nib of the pencil. And if you repeat it for one more time, let us say double stroke, then we will get a thick line. We will call that particular line as a thick line. Now suppose I want to draw a medium line. Then what we will do, with the same grade and with the same pencil, we will put less pressure on the nib of the lead pen and we will draw only for one time. So you see there will be variation between the thickness of these two lines. So we'll call this as a medium line. Now if I want to draw thin line, then we will hold pencil in this direction. Why in this direction? Because we don't want any pressure on the nib of the pencil. So just hold your pencil and don't put any pressure on the nib of the pencil. Just use the weight of the pencil and slide it along the scale. So you will get a very thin line. So with this technique, we can draw all the three lines with same grade of pencil. So whenever we will draw drawings in this particular course, we will use this technique only to draw thick lines, medium lines, and thin lines. And one more point to understand over here, that as we said in the zero lecture as well, that this course is a graphical language. So if we want to draw something in this course, and if we want that our handwriting should be good, so that means we have to use, or we have to draw these lines carefully, because in this course our handwriting will depend upon actually the way we draw the lines. Okay, now in the lecture we have talked about different types of lines based on the weight of the line and construction of the line. So we started with continuous thick line, then we discussed about continuous thin line. So we have seen the construction of these two lines. Now we will discuss about the construction of other lines. So now I will talk about the construction of dashed medium line, which is used for hidden lines. So in the lecture we have discussed that we have to draw dashes, and the length of each dash will be 3 millimeters, and the gap between any two dash should be 1.5 millimeters, and we have to keep that line medium. It means we will draw only for one time and we will put less pressure on the nib. And when we will draw, we will measure 3 millimeters, and approximately we will leave 1.5 mm gap, then 3 millimeters, 1.5 mm gap, and we will repeat this pattern up to the required length in the drawing. So this type of line is called dashed medium line. Over here we have used the length of each dash as 3 millimeters, and gap between any two dashes we have used 1.5 millimeters. So I hope the construction of dashed medium line is clear to you. Now we will talk about the next line, that is center line. So the construction of center line is chain thin line, and we have discussed that for that line the length of long dash is 6 millimeters and length of short dash is 1 millimeters, and gap between the long dash and short dash should be 1 millimeters, and this line starts from long dash and it ends with long dash. And one more point we learned about center lines, that these lines are continuous thin lines, and you can use the length of long dash as 10 millimeters also. That means either you can use 6:1 or 10:1 for this particular line. So let me show you the construction of this line. Let me use 10 millimeter as the length of long dash. Remember, we have to draw it thin, so we will put no pressure on the nib, just use the weight of the pencil. So 10 millimeters, approximately leave 1 millimeter gap, approximately 1 mm dash, 1 millimeter gap, 10 millimeters, and you have to repeat this pattern up to the required length. Now see this line, it is a thin line, and this is a medium line. This is a dash medium line, and it is a chain thin line. So we started with long dash, we ended with long dash. So I have used over here 10 millimeter as the length of long dash. I left 1 millimeter gap, then I have drawn short dash of 1 millimeter, again 1 millimeter gap, again we have drawn long dash of 10 millimeters. So this construction you have to use for chain thin line. Then in the lecture we talked about cutting plane line, that is chain thin thick at ends. So in that case what you will do, you will first draw chain thin line, and after that you will make the last dash and the starting dash thick. So it will become chain thin thick at ends. Then in that lecture we discussed about long dashed double dotted line. So it is similar to chain thin line, but only thing is that after drawing 10 millimeter long dash, leave 1 millimeter gap, draw 1 mm short dash, again leave 1 millimeter gap, again draw 1 mm short dash, again leave 1 millimeter gap, and then we will draw long dash. So this pattern you have to draw up to the required length. So this is also a thin line. So you can see we have started with long dash, we ended with long dash, and over here we used two small dashes, and gap between every dash is 1 millimeters. So this is called as phantom line or long dashed double dotted narrow. So I hope the construction of the lines is clear to you and you have an idea how to draw thick, medium and thin lines. Thank you very much.